The sound came first, a heavy thud against a wooden door, then a crash of glass that broke the night like lightning. Neighbors later said the shout that followed rode through the hallway with the same force as a hurricane warning. "Stay down." The room light burned bright, exposing a man's shadow looming over his wife. When it was over, a single bracelet had rolled beneath the sofa, a quiet, circular witness to everything. By the time the ambulance arrived, Keisha's eyes were closed, her breath thin and skipping. She looked like a candle struggling in the wind. At County General, fluorescent lamps painted the corridor in hard white. Doctors rushed her past the double doors, their voices clipped, professional, urgent. One nurse noticed the ring marks on her wrist and flinched, then kept moving. In the waiting area, the man who had done this, Marcus, stood frozen, his hands shaking in a way that made them look like someone else's. His shirt was wrinkled, his lips split, his eyes hunted. He mumbled, "I didn't mean," then swallowed the rest of the sentence. A security guard watched him from a short distance, jaw tight. When the surgeon stepped out, he didn't have the soft face of comfort. He had the hard face of someone counting seconds. "Are you the husband?" he asked. Marcus nodded. "Your wife is unconscious. Internal bleeding. But that's not the only problem." The doctor measured him with a long look. "You're Marcus Cole, right? We need to talk about your chart." "My chart? I'm fine." The doctor's voice went low. "You're not fine. Your genetic markers and file are flagged. Your liver enzyme levels have been deteriorating. You missed your last 2 specialist appointments." He held Marcus with a clinical stare. "Has anyone told you that your inherited condition may require a partial transplant, soon?" Marcus blinked, disoriented. The waiting room seemed to tilt. "This is about her." "It's about both of you now," the doctor said. "We ran cross-matching on the donors in our system last month when your primary referred you. So far, only one person has matched close enough to be considered a safe donor for you." He paused just long enough for the words to do damage. "It's your wife." The room went completely quiet. The television in the corner whispered about the weather over Atlanta, but no one heard it. Somewhere, a vending machine dropped a bottle with a dull thump. Marcus stared, his mind splitting in two. The man who had just hurt her and the man now hearing that she might be the only person standing between him and a future of pain, failure, maybe death. "What are you saying?" he asked, voice cracking. "I'm saying what I've already documented," the doctor said. "No sibling match on file, parents unavailable or incompatible, and the registry hasn't found a comparable candidate yet. Your wife, Keisha Cole, is, medically, your best chance." The syllables landed like stones in his lungs. The doctor continued, "Right now we're stabilizing her. There's swelling in the brain we need to monitor. She took a blow to the temple, and the bleeding we saw was mostly from the scalp and a likely spleen laceration. We'll know more after scans." He paused. "You need to understand the gravity. If you're arrested before consent is possible, or if she cannot eventually consent, your situation." "My situation?" Marcus whispered. "But, words rattled loose and died. He could see Keisha now, not from tonight but from mornings and markets, from church on Sundays and the small garden she coaxed from stubborn soil behind their apartment. Okra rising like green candles, tomatoes plump as promises. He remembered the first time he'd seen her in Lagos, within the noisy arms of Balagan Market, her laugh floating past hand-woven baskets and clouds of pepper and smoke, before he brought her back to Atlanta and said they'd start a life built on trust. He remembered her American cousin in College Park teasing, "Marcus, you better cherish her. Women like that don't happen twice." He remembered everything at once and none of it helped. "Where are her people?" the doctor asked. They're in Nigeria," he said, the words collapsing as they left. "Her auntie in Decatur. I'll call." "Do that," the doctor said. "And stay available." He left as quickly as he'd come, coat swinging, shoes whispering against tile. The security guard shifted his weight closer. "You want to sit?" he said, not unkindly. Marcus sat and pressed his fist to his mouth until his teeth ached. He had built a reputation in their block. A man with money coming in from a logistics company, a man with pride, a man who treated his words like orders. But money does not soften a hallway like this. Pride does not steady a stomach when grief holds a knife to it. Orders do not make time obey. In the next room a child began to cry. A woman soothed her in a whisper about angels who work night shifts. The words reached Marcus and settled like ash. He shut his eyes and saw scenes he did not want. Keisha in their kitchen, back turned, shoulders tight. Keisha reaching for his cheek at a party when he was already angry about a contract gone wrong. Keisha's brave mouth saying, "We need help, Marcus." You need to talk to somebody," he had shouted instead. Control looked like safety to him, until it started looking like cruelty. Long before Atlanta, back in Lagos, he'd watched his father's face calcify into that same tight mask. His father's voice never rose. He saved the loudness for silence, the punishment for later. In the mornings after, his mother's laughter would sound like it had been ironed flat. Marcus once swore he would never become that man. Somewhere between then and now, the vow had slipped from his hands like a wet stone. "Mr. Cole?" A different nurse approached. "We've stabilized your wife's breathing. She's not waking yet. We'll keep monitoring. Do you have someone to call?" He nodded and stepped into the hallway with his phone. It rang forever. When Auntie Miriam finally answered, her voice carried that blend of mother and captain. He told her enough to bring her running, not enough to make her break while driving. He hung up and stared through a narrow window at the night city. Atlanta was a jewelry box of light scattered across dark velvet. Somewhere a train sang its long metal song. He remembered how he and Keisha used to plan. They'd send money back to her mother in Surulere, they'd bring her little brother, Deo, over for school in a few years, they'd open a second branch of the logistics firm and hire young men who needed a straight path. They'd make something beautiful out of distance and hustle. But dreams are fragile if the hands holding them are not gentle. When Auntie Miriam arrived, her wrapper shushed against the floor with each step. She looked at Marcus once and the look was a verdict and a question. "Where is she?" And he asked, "ICU." His voice was paper thin. She nodded, lips pressed tight. "I will pray," she said, but her eyes promised more than prayer. They promised that whatever came next would not be easy for him. They sat in silence until the surgeon returned, flanked by a colleague. "We've controlled the swelling for now and stopped the splenic bleed," he said. "But there is still risk. The next 24 hours are critical." He shifted to face Marcus directly. "I want to be clear about your medical issue as well. If your condition flares, we may need to move quickly on your transplant plan. That plan depended on your wife's consent. Without it, your own timeline grows dangerous." "Is there no one else?" Auntie asked, her voice cutting through like a bell. "Right now, no," the surgeon said. "We can keep searching, but compatibility is complex. In some families, matches are common. In others, rare. Spouses aren't genetically related, but sometimes the markers align. Hers do with his." He paused. "I'm telling you this now so you understand the full picture." Auntie turned slowly to Marcus. "Do you understand?" she asked, each word a deliberate step. "Hurting her could end both your lives," the surgeon added, not cruelly, just as a fact spoken aloud. The hospital clock clicked forward a minute. The air hummed with machinery and fate. Marcus put his face in his hands and finally let the truth scrape him raw. This was not a storm he could outshout. This was a harvest of seeds he had planted with his own rage, jealous looks, hard words, deadly silence, hands that should have protected and instead destroyed. The night felt crowded with witnesses. The bracelet under the sofa, the neighbor who called 911, the nurse who saw the bruises, the aunt who had expected better, the doctor who knew how bodies keep records. The surgeon cleared his throat. "There's something else," he said. "I will not hide it because it could change everything in the next hour. Keisha's scans show an anomaly. We need to confirm, but if I'm right, it complicates the case significantly." Auntie leaned forward. "What kind of anomaly?" The surgeon looked from Auntie to Marcus. "A very early pregnancy." The word landed like thunder in a dry season, rolling down the hall and shaking every door. Auntie clutched her wrapper. Marcus felt his legs turn to glass. The doctor's radio crackled, summoning him back to the bright, humming rooms. "We'll know more soon," he said, already turning. "But hear me clearly, any decision from this minute on must protect her life first. And if she truly is the only viable donor for you, every second you used to think belonged to you now belongs to her." The double doors swung shut behind him, leaving the waiting room small and loud with silence. Marcus stared at the floor tiles until they blurred. Somewhere beyond the wall, machines beeped in steady patterns, proof of breath, proof of time, but for the first time in his life the future stood over him like a lion in tall grass, perfectly still, perfectly focused, perfectly ready to pounce. And just when he decided to stand and walk toward the ICU doors to say the words he should have said years ago, two uniformed officers stepped into the corridor, asked his name and reached for the cuffs. He didn't resist. He couldn't. As cold metal closed around his wrists, a blue light from the ER monitor flashed down the hall, and a nurse shouted to the surgeon to come back. Something in Keisha's numbers had changed. The doors swung open, alarms rising. Auntie covered her mouth. The officers tightened their grip. Inside the ICU, A new, sharper beeping had begun. The officers led Marcus down the corridor toward the small security room beside the ER, their steps clicking like a metronome for bad news. Auntie Miriam moved after them, wrapper swishing, chin lifted. She stopped only when a nurse raised a palm and asked her to wait. Beyond the ICU doors, the alarm that had spiked went low, then steadied, a thin electronic thread pulling everyone's breath along with it. "Sir, you're being detained pending questioning," one officer said, guiding Marcus onto a chair. The room smelled of coffee gone cold and the sharp bite of disinfectant. A television glowed without sound. The other officer stood near the door, eyes neutral but alert. "I won't run," Marcus said, voice flat. "I can't go anywhere." A paramedic pushed in with a portable machine and took his vitals at the nurse's request. The cuff tightened around his arm. His pulse thudded too fast. "You look pale," the paramedic said. "Any dizziness? Nausea?" "Been off," Marcus muttered. "For months, I guess." He remembered mornings when the mirror showed a faint yellow in his eyes and he told himself it was bad lighting. He remembered Keisha's hand on his cheek saying, "We have that specialist appointment at Grady, babe. We're going," and how he'd waved it away, calls to return, deals to nurse, pride to feed. The paramedic grunted. "Doctor will want labs." He wheeled the cart away. Across the hall, Auntie Miriam pressed knuckles to her mouth and whispered prayers that sounded as old as harm itself. A nurse came to sit beside her. "Her numbers stabilized after the alarm," the nurse said softly. "She's still unconscious, but the swelling is under control for now." Auntie nodded, tears sliding without drama. "Thank you." "Is she?" Her voice thinned. "We're still watching her closely," the nurse said. "The surgeon will come speak soon." She hesitated, then added, "We also confirmed the pregnancy test is positive." "Very early." Auntie's hand tightened around the strap of her handbag. "Lord," she whispered, and for a moment her eyes closed like doors against a storm. When she opened them again they found Marcus through the glass. She stood and walked in. The officers looked to the nurse, who shrugged. 2 minutes. They moved a step aside. Auntie didn't sit. She stood over Marcus with the tired, furious grace of someone who has loved a family across oceans and years. "When she came to me 2 weeks ago," Auntie began, her voice low, she brought a folder. "Papers from the clinic. Copies of your lab results." She said, "Auntie, I matched for Marcus if he ever needs me. I don't want him to be afraid. But I also don't want to be hurt again." Marcus blinked, pain crowding his chest. He pictured the folder, manila, edges soft from being held. Keisha had been the kind of woman who brought order to chaos. A list for groceries, a plan for saving, a calendar with birthdays marked in red, doctors' names in blue. Auntie continued, "She told me she would only consider surgery if 3 conditions were true. If the doctor said it was safe, if you agreed to get help for your anger, and if she felt respected, not controlled." Auntie looked at his face as if searching for the boy he once promised not to become. "She loved you enough to plan your rescue, and loved herself enough to set a price beyond money." The words landed heavy and holy. Marcus stared at his hands. "I don't know when I started breaking things instead of fixing them," he said, barely above a whisper. "I kept thinking I had time. To calm down. To apologize properly. To change. Time is what you spent tonight," Auntie said. "And it cost more than cash." She drew a long breath. "But I am not God. I cannot decide your ending. I can only decide my part." She faced the officer. "Please allow him to sit in the hallway when the doctor speaks. I want him to hear every word that his choices brought." The officers consulted with the nurse. After a minute, one nodded. "You can sit outside the ICU doors. No closer. No trouble." Marcus was walked to a chair opposite the double doors. He could see only a strip of bright inside, doctor's shadows moving like clock hands. His throat felt scraped raw. He thought of Lagos again, of how he'd first noticed Keisha bargaining for tomatoes at Balagan Market, her accent sprinkling Atlanta over Lagos like pepper on stew. He'd said, "You don't bargain like a visitor." She'd laughed. "I bargain like a woman who respects her money." He remembered the soft heat of that afternoon, how the city sang with horns and voices, how his chest, so often tight with ambition, had loosened because a stranger's laugh told it to. He remembered how they'd stood on Freedom Parkway months later, watching the Atlanta skyline glow like fresh promises. They'd planned a life of both Nigeria and America, both hustle and Sabbath, both success and gentleness. He had delivered half. The surgeon came out with a second doctor and a chart. The white coat was streaked with the smudges of work. "Miss Cole is holding steady," he began, looking at Auntie first. The swelling is reduced. We addressed the splenic injury. She's on oxygen support. The pregnancy is very early, days to a couple of weeks. It makes decision-making more complex, but right now our focus is keeping her alive and stable. And he swallowed. Thank you. The surgeon shifted, eyes moving to Marcus. Mr. Cole, your labs show your liver function is worse than last month's results. You've been ignoring symptoms. That can't continue. He set the chart down. I also need you both to understand something difficult. The hallway hushed. Even the vending machine seemed to hold its breath. When we scanned for trauma, the surgeon said, we look everywhere. We discovered not only the splenic laceration, but also a tear on your wife's liver surface. It is not life-threatening at the moment, but it is significant. The words didn't sink in at once. They hung in the air like smoke. Explain, Auntie said, already bracing. In plain terms, the surgeon answered, the organ that might have saved your life, Mr. Cole, has been injured. A living donor liver transplant requires a healthy donor liver segment. Any injury can disqualify a donor at least for a long time. Even if she wakes and even if she chooses to help you, she would have to fully heal, and pregnancy would postpone any consideration further. Silence spread, thick and suffocating. Marcus felt the floor tilt again. The officer behind him shifted his weight and looked away like a man who has seen too many consequences catch up to their authors. So you're saying, Auntie said slowly, that the thing that could have rescued him, he damaged it? Yes, the surgeon said. I'm saying the odds that she can donate have gone down sharply because of tonight. He kept his voice careful, no judgment on it, only reality. We will not know the full picture until she stabilizes and heals. But even then, pregnancy changes everything, both ethically and medically. Marcus closed his eyes. In the dark behind his lids, he saw it, the sharp, ugly loop of the night curling back on itself. His anger, his blow, the fall, the injury to the very organ matched to him by a lottery of genetic markers. He had not just threatened the life of the woman he married. He had attacked his own chance at living too. The circular horror of it burned his throat with bile. Is there any other path? And he asked. We'll put you higher on the deceased donor list, the second doctor said, looking at Marcus. We'll call partner centers. We'll push for priority based on medical urgency. This is not hopeless. But you must cooperate with care, and you must face legal and social consequences for what you've done. Medical urgency and justice can exist in the same room. Auntie nodded once. They must. The doctor continued, right now Miss Cole needs quiet and time. If she wakes, she'll have a lot to process. We'll keep you informed every few hours. He glanced at the officers and then back at Marcus. For your own health, we're admitting you overnight for monitoring. Your numbers are borderline dangerous. One officer exhaled. We can keep him under watch in a medical room, he said. Auntie sat down slowly, bones suddenly loud. She told me last month, she murmured almost to herself, that love without safety is just fear in nice clothes. Marcus bowed his head. The words pierced like bright needles. He wanted to go back, to catch his wrist before it swung, to stay his voice before it sharpened, to tell the man he'd just been to stand down. But you cannot rewind a hand in motion. You can only own the motion and change the hand. An orderly arrived to wheel him toward a small room near the observation ward. The hallway felt longer now. He passed a poster about support groups. Anger doesn't mean you are strong. Asking for help does. He couldn't look at it. They rolled him into a bed under a weak ceiling light. The cuffs clicked off and were replaced with a cuff of a different kind. An 4-line, a monitor cable, a soft clip on his finger. The machines blinked his weakness back at him without shame. A nurse drew the curtain almost closed, leaving a small gap through which Marcus could still see the corridor. Auntie's shadow moved past it on her way to the ICU, straight-backed and steady as someone carrying both grief and resolve. As the beeps hummed in their rhythm, a memory rose uninvited. Keisha in their tiny garden behind the apartment, late summer, coaxing dry soil with a patient hand. See this? She'd said, holding up a green shoot. You water too much, it drowns. You water too little, it dies. But if you learn its timing, it forgives you. She'd smiled sideways. We need to learn each other's timing. He had learned only his own. Footsteps approached. The curtain whisper opened just enough to reveal the surgeon again, face tighter now. We have another update, he said. It's about the liver injury we found on Miss Cole. Auntie reappeared beside him, one hand gripping the bed rail like a cliff's edge. What is it? She asked. The surgeon hesitated for the first time that night, a pause that stretched like a bridge over a ravine. The detailed scan shows the laceration is deeper than we thought, he said. We can manage it, but the damage appears to be in the same segment that would have made her the safest donor for you. If this holds true after she heals, she may never be eligible to donate to you at all." The words fell into the room and everything inside it changed shape. The future he had banked on, quietly, arrogantly, buckled. In the next bed over, a machine clicked. In the hallway, a janitor's cart rolled by with a soft rattle. Somewhere far off, a baby cried. Marcus stared at the surgeon, then at Auntie, then at the small, stubborn strip of light under the ICU doors. His hands, empty now, were shaking again. And then, from the ceiling speaker, a voice broke the air. "Code to ICU room 8. Repeat, code to ICU room 8. Keisha's room. The hallway exploded into motion. Nurses dashed past with crash carts, rubber saws squeaking on the tile. The two officers guarding Marcus instinctively moved aside as if the urgency carried its own command. Auntie Miriam's wrapper fluttered as she ran, one hand clutching the hem so she wouldn't trip. The air smelled of antiseptic and panic. The voice from the speaker repeated, "Code to ICU room 8. Marcus yanked at his foreline. The monitor beside him screamed in protest, and one officer grabbed his arm. "Sir, you can't. My wife." His voice tore out of him raw and fierce. "That's her. That's Keisha. She's in critical care," the officer said, holding him firm. "You need to stay put." But Marcus wasn't hearing words anymore. The world had collapsed to a single sound, the long, flat tone that suddenly burst from down the hall. The unmistakable, heart-stopping alarm that signals a life hanging by a thread. His stomach dropped. His pulse thundered in his ears. Auntie Miriam reached the glass window first. Inside the ICU, 3 nurses worked around Keisha's bed. The ventilator hissed. The surgeon leaned over, calling numbers. A defibrillator paddled once. Thump. Keisha's body jerked, then stilled again. "Charge to 200, someone shouted. "Clear." Thump. Still nothing. Auntie pressed both palms to the glass, whispering prayers through trembling lips. "Lord, please, not now. Not like this." Marcus shoved against the guard's grip, his voice a broken plea. "Let me see her. Please. Just let me." The younger officer hesitated. "He's cuffed to the bed." "He won't get far," he muttered, then looked to his partner. The older man sighed and nodded. 1 minute. They unclipped him. Marcus stumbled forward, dragging the 4-pole beside him. His hospital gown fluttered, bare feet slapping the cold floor. He reached the ICU door just as the surgeon stepped back, sweat gleaming on his forehead. "Pulse is back," the nurse announced. Relief rolled through the room like a sigh too scared to be loud. Keisha's chest began to rise and fall again with mechanical rhythm. Her skin, pale beneath its warm brown hue, glistened with the soft sheen of life returning. The surgeon pulled off his gloves and turned toward the hallway. When he saw Marcus there, barely upright, tears streaking his face, his expression softened just slightly. "She's stable again," he said quietly. "But that was close. Too close." Auntie swayed with relief, murmuring thanks under her breath. Marcus sagged against the doorframe, every muscle trembling. "She almost..." His voice broke. "I thought..." "She's still fighting," the doctor said. "But understand, her body is under severe strain. The pregnancy complicates everything. She needs absolute peace now. No stress, no trauma, no shouting." The irony burned like acid. No shouting. The very thing he had refused to give her. The surgeon's gaze sharpened. "You'll need to give her reason to wake, not fear." Marcus nodded, eyes never leaving Keisha's still form. Can I talk to her? Just for a second?" The surgeon hesitated. "She can't hear you consciously. But the brain sometimes registers familiar voices. Keep it brief." A nurse opened the door just wide enough for him to stand at the foot of the bed. Machines blinked around her like artificial fireflies. Keisha lay still, her head wrapped in bandage, a thin line of oxygen tubing resting beneath her nose. Her hands, once warm and expressive, were motionless by her sides. A pulse beeped steadily on the monitor. Marcus's throat tightened. "Keisha," he whispered, stepping closer. "It's me, Marcus." His voice trembled, brittle as old glass. "I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You told me to get help, to talk to someone, and I didn't listen. I thought being strong meant being loud. I thought winning meant control." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "You never tried to take my strength, you tried to teach me peace. You even planned to save me. Even after everything. You've always had the bigger heart." He reached out but stopped inches above her hand, afraid to touch what he had broken. Please, come back. I need to tell you in person. I need to do right by you. Behind him, Auntie stood silently, tears tracing slow paths down her cheeks. She turned to the surgeon. Will she wake up? The surgeon folded his arms. Her brain activity is steady. But trauma like this doesn't heal in hours. It may take days, or longer. We can't predict. Marcus closed his eyes. Days? He murmured as if testing the word against his guilt. I'll wait. He meant it. For once in his life, Marcus was willing to wait. That night, rain tapped against the hospital windows. Marcus sat in his observation bed, cuffed again for protocol, staring through the small square of glass toward the ICU doors. Auntie Miriam had gone home briefly to rest, though he knew she wouldn't sleep. The rain whispered its endless apology against the city. His phone lay on the table, returned to him under police watch. It buzzed with messages, journalists sniffing out a domestic violence story turned tragedy, his assistant texting, "Boss, what happened? News said something about you." He ignored them all. Nothing outside this corridor mattered anymore. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Machines hummed their cold lullaby. Marcus's mind wandered through the wreckage of his choices. He remembered their wedding, small, joyful, in a Lagos church. Keisha wore a golden gelly that shimmered under sunlight, her smile so bright it seemed to pull all darkness away. He'd promised then, "Till death do us part." And yet, he had been the one to almost deliver that death. He whispered the words now, but they tasted like ash. "Till death do us part." At dawn, a soft knock came on his door. Auntie Miriam entered, eyes weary but calmer. She carried a thermos of tea. "Morning," she said quietly. He nodded. "Any news?" "She's still the same. Still breathing. The doctor says that's good." They sat in silence for a moment, the faint hum of rain the only sound. Then Auntie spoke again. "Marcus, I prayed all night. I asked God why he allows pain like this. The answer I felt was strange." Marcus looked up. "What did you feel?" "That sometimes pain is the only language stubborn hearts understand." He winced but didn't argue. He knew she was right. Auntie poured the tea into a paper cup, handed it to him. "You have to face what's next. The police will file charges. You may lose your business. You may lose your freedom for a while." "I've already lost everything," he murmured. "No," Auntie said firmly. "You haven't lost grace yet. That's the one thing you can still earn. But only if you fight for it the right way." He gripped the cup, trembling. "If she wakes up, if she gives me that chance, I'll do whatever it takes." "She may forgive you," Auntie said. "But even forgiveness won't erase what happened. You'll have to live the rest of your life proving you mean it." By noon, the hospital quieted. A new doctor came to check his vitals and mentioned they were transferring him to a side room near the ICU for medical supervision and police monitoring. He didn't resist. When they rolled his bed into the corner suite, he could see Keisha's room through the glass panel across the hall. She was there, motionless, her chest rising faintly. And then the surgeon arrived again, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole," he said slowly, "there's something we need to discuss, about your health." Marcus's pulse jumped. "What is it?" "We've been reviewing your genetic data alongside your wife's test results from before the incident." The doctor looked down at the clipboard, then back up. "There's an anomaly we didn't notice earlier, a recessive marker that runs in your family. It seems to be linked to a condition affecting your liver. We found the same marker in one other file from our donor registry." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" The doctor's eyes met his. "The file belongs to your wife's father. The man she's never met." Marcus's breath caught. "Her father? He abandoned them years ago." "Yes," the doctor said quietly. "But genetically he's your second cousin." The words hit like a shockwave. "What? How is that possible?" "It means," the doctor continued, "your families are distantly related. Which also explains the rare genetic match that made her your best donor candidate. You and your wife share a very old bloodline." Marcus stared, speechless. The doctor went on, voice calm but heavy. "If we can locate her father, he might also be a viable donor for you. He carries the same marker, and his liver is likely in better condition. But there's one problem." Marcus's heart raced. "What problem?" "No one's heard from him in 15 years. His last known address was in Lagos. But your wife, she once mentioned he might have moved to Port Harcourt." The doctor straightened. "If she wakes up, she might be the only one who can tell us where he is." Marcus's gaze drifted back to Keisha's silent room, realization dawning in cold waves. The woman he had nearly killed was the key not only to his survival, but also to the buried connection between their families. And as he whispered her name, one of the machines in her room suddenly changed rhythm. Her fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. Then the monitor beeped twice. Slow, steady, deliberate. Keisha was waking up. And if this story has pulled you in so far, remember to subscribe, like, and share this video so more people can discover powerful African folktales like this one. Also, comment below where you're watching from. We'd love to know your city or country. For the first time in 2 days, the beeping monitor no longer sounded like an enemy, it sounded like a heartbeat. A fragile rhythm, but steady. Marcus froze in his chair, eyes fixed on the glass panel separating him from Keisha's room. Her fingers moved again, a tiny twitch that looked almost accidental, but the nurse inside saw it too. She leaned close, calling softly, "Mrs. Cole? Can you hear me?" A moment later, Keisha's lips parted. No words, just a faint breath. The nurse's voice lifted. "Doctor. She's responding." Marcus was on his feet before he realized it, the 4-line tugging at his wrist. Auntie Miriam, who had been half dozing in the chair nearby, jolted upright, eyes wide. The surgeon rushed in with 2 nurses. They surrounded Keisha's bed like a small army of hope. Her eyelids fluttered again, then opened halfway. The room's light glinted off the moisture on her lashes. She looked lost at first, like someone surfacing from a long, dark dream, but her gaze slowly found a shape, a sound, a meaning. "Keisha?" the surgeon said gently. "You're safe. You're in County General Hospital. Can you hear me?" Her voice came as a whisper, cracked and weak. "Where am I?" "In the ICU," he replied softly. "You've been here 2 days. You had an accident." Her forehead creased. "Accident?" Then, as her eyes roamed the room, they landed on the figure standing frozen beyond the glass, Marcus. Her breath hitched. Her pulse spiked on the monitor. The surgeon noticed immediately. "It's okay," he said, stepping slightly into her line of sight to block the panic. "You're safe, Mrs. Cole. No one's going to hurt you. Just focus on breathing." Auntie Miriam's heart clenched. She moved to the window and whispered a prayer, clutching her rosary tight. Marcus, still pale, took a single step backward, his expression a maze of guilt and disbelief. She was alive, and looking at him like she was staring at a ghost. Minutes crawled by as nurses checked her vitals and adjusted the oxygen line. Her voice grew clearer. "My head hurts." "That's expected," the doctor said kindly. "You had a bad fall and some swelling in your brain. But you're recovering well." Keisha's eyes shifted toward the window again. This time she didn't flinch, she just watched Marcus in silence. He raised a trembling hand, not in greeting but apology. No words passed, yet everything about his face said, "I did this. And I will never forgive myself." Later that afternoon, the doctor allowed Auntie Miriam to sit with her niece for 10 minutes. The old woman entered quietly, her wrapper whispering against the linoleum floor. "My child," she said softly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You scared us." Keisha tried to smile. It came out weak, crooked. "Auntie, is the baby?" Auntie froze, then nodded slowly. "Yes, my dear. The baby is fine. The doctor says it's still very early but stable." Keisha closed her eyes and a tear rolled across her temple. "Thank God." Then her lips tightened. "Where is Marcus?" Auntie hesitated. "He's here in the hospital. Under watch. He hasn't left." "The police?" Keisha cut in, voice trembling. "Is he all right?" Auntie blinked in disbelief. "You're asking that?" "I don't know why," Keisha whispered. "But I keep thinking. I felt something before I blacked out. Like something was breaking. Not just my body but something between us. Something I didn't want to die." Auntie took her hand. "Child, what broke was his soul. Maybe God's trying to fix it with pain." Keisha looked at her aunt for a long time, tears pooling in her eyes. "If he's in pain, maybe that's enough punishment." "Forgiveness doesn't mean foolishness," Auntie warned gently. "If you forgive him, do it because your heart needs peace, not because he deserves it." Keisha nodded faintly. "I know." Across the hall, Marcus sat in a wheelchair, listening through the glass. Every word sank into him like an arrow. He wanted to speak, to beg, to promise, but the doctor's warning echoed in his head. No stress, no trauma, no shouting. So he waited. Quietly. Patiently. Like a man learning to breathe again. That evening, when the doctor finished his rounds, he entered Marcus's room with cautious optimism. "She's stable now," he said. "That's a miracle in itself. But there's more." Marcus's pulse quickened. "More?" "Yes. We got the genetic confirmation. Her father is indeed your second cousin." That makes him not only a potential match for you, but the best one. Marcus sat straighter. You found him? Not yet, the doctor said. But Keisha mentioned Port Harcourt before the incident. If she's strong enough, she might help us locate him. Your survival depends on finding that man. Marcus pressed his palm over his mouth. Port Harcourt? He whispered it like a prayer. She told me once he worked in the oil fields there before disappearing. I didn't believe her. Believe her now, the doctor said, because this connection could save your life. That night, a soft knock came at Keisha's door. It was the surgeon again. There's someone who wants to speak to you, he said. But only if you're ready. Keisha hesitated. Marcus. He nodded. Her lips trembled, but she said quietly, 5 minutes. Marcus entered slowly, his hospital gown replaced by simple gray clothes. A small bandage marked his arm where an 4 had been. He stood at the doorway as though crossing into sacred ground. His eyes were hollow, his voice gentle to a whisper. Keisha? I'm sorry. She didn't answer, just looked at him. The silence between them was louder than any argument they'd ever had. I know I said those words before, he continued, his voice cracking, but this time they're all I have. I broke something that can't be fixed, not by money, not by time, not even by love. But I'll spend whatever's left of my life trying to make sure you heal. Even if that means staying far away. Keisha blinked back tears. Why, Marcus? Why did you change into that man I didn't recognize? He lowered his head. Because I thought control meant love. I thought being feared meant being respected. I became my father without even realizing it. Her chest tightened. You hurt me, and our child. He swallowed hard, guilt written across his face. I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want you to know, if you tell the doctor where your father is, you might save me. And I'll never ask you for another thing again. Keisha stared at him for a long moment. The room hummed with machines, but her silence carried the loudest weight. Finally she said softly, he's in Port Harcourt, Bonny Island. He writes to me sometimes, through a post office box. He's not the monster my mother said he was. Just a broken man who didn't know how to stay. Marcus lifted his eyes slowly, tears blurring them. Thank you. I didn't say I'm doing it for you, Keisha whispered. I'm doing it because if I let you die, the darkness wins again. He nodded, eyes full of pain and gratitude. I understand. Then after a long pause she said, but Marcus, if this operation happens and you survive, don't come looking for me. The part of me that was your wife died that night. Let her rest. Marcus's breath trembled. I will. He turned to leave, shoulders heavy with regret. As he reached the door, Keisha's weak voice stopped him. Marcus. He looked back. Find the man you used to be, she said. And if you ever find him, tell him I forgave him. But don't tell me. Marcus closed his eyes. Tears slipped down his cheeks silently as he nodded. I will. Then he stepped out of the room, the door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of something holy and the beginning of something uncertain. That night, the hospital fell into a deep hush. But beneath the quiet, something new was forming, a fragile truce between pain and redemption. In Keisha's room she whispered to her unborn child, we're going to be okay. Mommy's strong. And across the hall, Marcus stared at the window where her light glowed faintly, whispering back to no one in particular, maybe this is how forgiveness feels, like punishment that saves. Outside the rain finally stopped. But at the edge of the night, in a place called Port Harcourt, a weary old man with a faded envelope and trembling hands stared at a letter marked return to sender. He looked toward the sea and murmured, Keisha, oh my daughter, maybe it's time to go home. And with that, the past began to stir, quietly but surely. The next morning broke calm and clear, sunlight pooling across the hospital walls like the first touch of mercy. Nurses wheeled carts through the corridors. Machines beeped in their steady rhythm of living things. For the first time in days, Marcus felt the weight of exhaustion heavier than guilt. He hadn't slept. He sat by the window watching the city wake, yellow buses crawling along the wet streets, church bells echoing somewhere beyond the skyline. Every sound felt like a reminder that life somehow goes on. Auntie Miriam entered quietly, carrying a small tray of breakfast. You should eat, she said softly. I'm not hungry, Marcus murmured. She set the tray down anyway. You'll need strength for what's next. He turned to her. What's next? The police want to move forward with charges. The doctor wants to move forward with treatment. And Keisha, she paused, she's deciding whether she wants to move forward with forgiveness. Marcus lowered his eyes. She shouldn't forgive me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Auntie sighed. You talk like a man already buried. But you're still breathing. That means you're still responsible for what comes after. He nodded, staring at his bandaged wrist. I'm going to find her father. If he's really my cousin, if he can help, I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Auntie studied him for a moment. There was something different in his voice, less fire, more resolve. Do you have any way to reach him? Not directly, Marcus said. But I know people in Port Harcourt. My company used to ship containers there through Bonny Island Terminal. I can call someone. Maybe they can find him. Across the hall, Keisha sat propped up in bed, eyes half closed, hands resting gently over her abdomen. Her voice had returned, soft but steady. The doctor entered with a clipboard. How are you feeling today, Mrs. Cole? Tired, she said. But alive. He smiled. That's a good place to start. He flipped through her chart. The baby's heartbeat is steady. And your recovery is on track. There's something else we need to discuss, though. It's about your father. Keisha blinked. Did Marcus tell you? The doctor nodded. He mentioned Bonny Island. We've already contacted the Nigerian health network and a local clinic that might have his records. If we find him, he could be the key to your husband's survival. She hesitated, voice faint. He's not my husband anymore. I understand, the doctor said gently. But we also understand you're the only person who might help us locate him. Will you allow us to reach out using your name? She thought for a long moment. If it saves a life, yes. The doctor nodded. Thank you. You're a strong woman, Keisha. I don't say that lightly. When he left, Keisha looked out the window at the morning sky. Her reflection stared back. A woman changed. Not the one who used to laugh in the kitchen while Marcus teased her about burnt toast. Not the one who wore bright Ankara dresses and believed love could heal all. This woman had seen what love could destroy. She touched her belly and whispered, "We'll build a different kind of love, my baby. One that doesn't hurt." 2 weeks passed. The hospital corridor no longer smelled like panic. Marcus's legal team negotiated with police. His bail was set, but the court required him to stay in the hospital until medically cleared. During those days, he threw himself into tracking Keisha's father. He made calls to old contacts in Lagos and Port Harcourt. Most led nowhere. Until one evening, his phone buzzed with a message from an old logistics partner. Found a man matching your description. Older, works at a small dock near Bonny Island. Says his name is Peter Ease. Used to live in Surulere. Might be the one. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, then called the number attached. After 3 rings, a rough voice answered. Hello. Marcus's voice trembled. Mr. Ease? Yes. Who's speaking? This is Marcus Cole. I believe you might be the father of Keisha Cole. Silence. Then a shaky breath. Keisha, my daughter? Is she alive? She's alive, Marcus said softly. But she's in the hospital. She was hurt. By me. A pause followed, then a weary sigh. I know that kind of hurt. Her mother told me long ago that pain follows men like us if we don't change. Marcus swallowed. You're my cousin apparently. Distant but blood still. I know, Peter said. Your father and I share a grandfather. I recognized your name when I heard it once in Lagos Business News. Never thought you'd marry my daughter. I didn't know either, Marcus whispered. But right now, you're the only one who can help me. My liver is failing. The doctors say you're a potential match. Peter was silent again, then said quietly, You hurt her, and now you need her father to save you. Yes, Marcus said, voice breaking. I don't deserve it, but it's the truth. The line crackled. Send me the hospital details, Peter said finally. If my blood can fix what yours destroyed, maybe that's how God writes mercy. Marcus exhaled shakily. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Peter said. When I get there, we'll talk about forgiveness, and what kind of man you want to be after this. 3 days later, a plane from Nigeria landed in Atlanta. At the airport gate, a tall, aging man with weathered hands and gray in his beard stepped out, holding a worn envelope. Inside it was a photo of a younger Keisha, maybe 8 years old, smiling with a missing front tooth. When Peter Ease walked into County General Hospital, the security guard mistook him for a preacher. He carried no luggage, only quiet authority. Keisha was the first to see him through the glass window. Her breath caught in her throat. Daddy? He turned, eyes wet. My baby. For a moment, neither moved. Then she lifted her trembling hands and he came closer. Their reunion was quiet, full of tears but no noise, just two souls finding each other after too long apart. I thought you were dead, she whispered. I was, he said softly. Until now. They talked for hours, voices low and hearts heavy with things left unsaid. Peter told her about the years he'd spent trying to send letters that never reached her. How he'd cleaned ships to survive. How he prayed every night for a second chance. Keisha listened, and for the first time since the night of her beating, she felt something shift inside her. Something close to peace. That evening the surgeon gathered everyone. Keisha, Peter, Auntie Miriam, and Marcus, in a small consultation room. Mr. Ease's tests came back, he announced. He's a strong candidate. If all goes well, we can schedule the transplant in 3 days. A ripple of relief swept the room. Peter nodded. If my blood can help him live, I'll do it. But I have one condition. The doctor tilted his head. Which is? Peter looked straight at Marcus. After you heal, you go to counseling. Real counseling. Not apology speeches or Bible quotes. Work. Because if my daughter ever sees fear in her child's eyes because of you, I will come back, not as a donor but as a father. Marcus's throat tightened. I promise. Peter nodded. Then we have a deal. Outside the hospital later that night, rain returned, soft, cleansing rain that smelled of dust turning to soil. Marcus stood by the window watching it streak the glass. Behind him, the soft hum of machines continued. For the first time in his life, Marcus didn't see the rain as a burden. He saw it as a beginning. Somewhere inside that same building, Keisha whispered to her aunt, maybe forgiveness isn't about letting him go free. Maybe it's about letting me go free. And in another room, Peter Ease prayed, Lord, if this surgery takes my life, let it give them both a second chance. But just as peace began to settle, a nurse rushed into the waiting area the next morning, breathless. Doctor, she called out. We've got a problem with Mr. Ease's scans. Something's not right. The surgeon froze mid-step. What do you mean? His liver shows early-stage cirrhosis, she said quickly. He's not as healthy as we thought. The corridor went silent. Keisha's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus's world began to spin again. The surgeon exhaled sharply. We'll need to run more tests. But if this is confirmed. He looked at Marcus gravely. Then we've just lost our last donor. And just like that, the fragile hope that had begun to blossom fell apart, again. The air in the consultation room thickened, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The nurse's words seemed to echo long after she'd finished speaking. We've just lost our last donor. Keisha's face went pale, her hand clutching the side of her hospital bed. Peter, though composed, looked down at his trembling fingers as if they had betrayed him. Auntie Miriam crossed herself quietly, whispering, God, not again. Marcus stood frozen near the doorway. His heart, which had briefly dared to hope, now pounded with the dull rhythm of fear. He turned toward the doctor. You said he was strong. You said he was my best chance. The doctor's voice softened. He is strong, Mr. Cole. But the new scans show scarring, likely from years of untreated hepatitis. It's not advanced, but it means his liver can't safely be divided. A transplant from him would endanger both lives. Peter raised his head slowly. So I'm useless to him now? Not useless, the doctor said gently. Just unable to help in the way we hoped. Peter's lips pressed tight. Then I'll stay anyway. My daughter needs her father now, not my organs. Keisha tried to smile, but her voice quivered. Daddy, don't say that. Marcus stepped forward, voice breaking. There must be another way. Another donor list, another hospital. Something. We're searching, the doctor assured him. We'll contact Emory and Grady, maybe Houston if we must. But without a family match, it's difficult. Marcus's knees buckled, and he gripped the back of a chair for balance. So this is it? After everything, I just die. No, Auntie Miriam said firmly, stepping forward. You don't die. You live with what you did until God decides otherwise. And maybe that's the lesson meant for you. Her words sliced deep, but they carried truth. Marcus lowered his head, tears glistening at the corners of his eyes. Maybe I deserve it. Keisha looked at him through glassy eyes. No one deserves death, Marcus. But we all deserve consequences. That night, Peter sat beside his daughter's bed, humming softly, a tune from her childhood. She rested her head back, eyes closed, listening. I remember that song, she whispered. It's the one your mother used to sing when you couldn't sleep, he said. You'd cry until she hummed it, then you'd drift off like the world was safe again. Keisha smiled faintly. She used to say that love was louder than pain. Peter nodded. And sometimes pain teaches love how to speak. Across the hallway, Marcus listened to their voices through the thin hospital walls. He'd been moved into a quieter room, partly for his health, partly because Auntie Miriam didn't want Keisha seeing him often. He didn't protest. He didn't have the right to. He stared at his reflection in the window, hollow eyes, gray skin, a body that looked years older than its age. "You did this," he whispered to himself. "You did all of this." He thought of his father, of the nights he'd hidden under a table while his mother cried behind a locked door. He thought of how he'd sworn never to become him. And yet, here he was, bleeding the same violence into someone who had only ever tried to love him. The monitor beside him beeped in rhythm with his guilt. 3 days later, a call came from Nigeria. The hospital administrator answered first, then passed the line to Marcus's doctor. "Dr. Adams speaking." A male voice came through, thick with a Yoruba accent. "Good day, sir. I'm calling from St. John's Medical Center, Port Harcourt. We heard about your search for Mr. Ease. We ran his file through our database after you requested an update." "Yes." "Well, it seems he once registered a brother, now deceased, whose son donated blood in a screening 2 years ago. That donor's genetic markers are very close to both Peter and Marcus Cole. He might also be a compatible candidate." Adams's brows furrowed. "You're saying there's another relative?" "Yes. The young man's name is Samuel Ease. He's 26, lives in ABA, works as a welder. We're sending you the contact information right now." The doctor's pulse quickened. "That's incredible. Thank you." When he hung up, he immediately called Auntie Miriam and Peter to the office. Keisha was resting, but the urgency couldn't wait. "There's another possible donor," Adams announced. "Peter's nephew, your cousin Marcus. He lives in Nigeria. Healthy, young, and showing an almost identical marker pattern." Peter exhaled in disbelief. "Samuel? That boy helped me rebuild my roof last year. He's like a son to me." Auntie clasped her hands. "God still works in mysterious ways." Marcus whispered, "Can he come here?" "We'll contact the embassy for an emergency medical visa," the doctor said. "But there's another option. We can coordinate a transplant abroad if he agrees. It'll take time, but time is something you're running short on." Marcus's voice was faint. "I'll fund everything, whatever it takes. Just get him here." 2 weeks later, Samuel arrived. He was tall, muscular, and carried the easy smile of a man unbroken by life's cruelty. When he stepped into the hospital, Keisha gasped. It was like seeing a younger version of her father. "Same eyes, same walk. You're Keisha," he said softly. "I've heard so much about you." She smiled weakly. "You came all this way?" He nodded. "Family is family even when oceans try to drown it." Then he turned to Marcus. The smile faded. "And you're the man who hurt my cousin." Marcus lowered his eyes. "Yes." Samuel's jaw tightened. "You should be thankful I believe in God." "I am," Marcus said quietly. "Every second." Samuel looked to Peter. "Uncle, are you sure about this? He doesn't deserve your blood, or mine." Peter laid a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe not. But sometimes mercy isn't about deserving, it's about ending a curse before it continues." Samuel studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then let's end it." The surgery date was set. The hospital prepared for one of its most delicate transplants in months. Reporters began calling. It had become a human interest story. Abused wife's family saves her husband's life. Keisha refused interviews. "This isn't a headline," she said to the nurse. "It's a warning." The night before surgery, Marcus sat in his bed writing letters. One to Keisha, one to Peter, one to Samuel, and one to his unborn child, folded carefully and sealed with shaking hands. He didn't know if he'd survive the operation. But he knew one thing. He would not die as the man who beat his wife. He would die as the man who tried to make it right. Morning came. The hallway was silent except for the squeak of wheels as nurses prepared the stretchers. Samuel was calm, joking softly with the anesthesiologist. Peter prayed beside him. Keisha stood at her window, watching from across the glass as they wheeled Marcus away. Their eyes met briefly. For the first time she didn't see rage in his. Only surrender. When the doors closed behind him, Auntie Miriam whispered, "Whatever happens now, God has already written it." And in the sterile cold of the operating theater, as the lights dimmed and masks were fitted, the last thing Marcus heard before drifting under was the surgeon's voice. "Let's begin." The surgical lights flared white and blinding. Monitors blinked in rhythm, nurses moved in silence, and the metallic scent of antiseptic filled the room. Dr. Adams looked over his team once more. "Time check, 8:46 a.m. Let's make this count. In two separate operating theaters divided by a transparent partition, Samuel lay on one side, Marcus on the other. Between them stood the wall of medical glass, clear enough for the surgeons to see each other's work, symbolic enough to feel like destiny itself was watching. Administer anesthesia, Adams instructed. Samuel's breathing slowed, then steadied. Marcus's eyelids fluttered shut. Machines took over what the human body could no longer do on its own. Outside the theater, the waiting room was packed with quiet anxiety. Keisha sat by the window, hands clasped tight. Auntie Miriam prayed under her breath, her rosary beads moving like a ticking clock. Peter sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The TV on the wall played muted news about politics, but no one was listening. Each minute stretched thin, heavy with the weight of what was being repaired, and what could never be undone. After 3 hours, a nurse appeared briefly to update them. The donor's liver segment has been successfully removed. Stable so far. Keisha exhaled shakily, whispering a thank you that cracked halfway through. Peter closed his eyes and muttered, God, keep them both alive long enough to learn from this. Back inside the operating room, the transplant began. Every motion was precise, a dance between science and hope. Samuel's liver segment, healthy and strong, was prepared for implantation. Marcus's damaged tissue was carefully excised. Dr. Adams murmured to his team, attach the portal vein, steady now, good. The younger surgeon beside him wiped his brow. BP holding at 110/70. Excellent, Adams said. We're making progress. But progress is fragile. Just as the final connection was being sutured, a monitor beeped faster. Marcus's blood pressure plunged. Pressure dropping. Heart rate irregular. Give epinephrine stat. Nurses rushed in. Adams gritted his teeth. Not now. Not after all this. The room filled with noise, machines, shouts, commands, prayers whispered under surgical masks. And then beep, 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 flatline. Clear. Adams shouted. The defibrillator charged. Thump. Marcus's body jerked. Nothing. Clear again. Thump. Still nothing. Come on, Marcus, Adams muttered. You've got a second chance waiting out there. Another charge. Thump. This time a weak rhythm. Then stronger. Then steady. Pulse returning, a nurse said breathlessly. Adams exhaled hard. Let's finish this before he changes his mind. The team worked for another hour. When the final stitch was made, Adams whispered, time, 4:57 p.m. transplant complete. By evening both men were in recovery. Samuel's operation was successful. He slept peacefully, his strong body already mending. Marcus, however, was not out of danger. The surgery had pushed his weakened system to its limit. Keisha entered the ICU quietly, escorted by a nurse. Tubes and monitors surrounded Marcus, but his chest rose and fell, proof of life, however fragile. She stood by his bed, watching the man who had once terrified her now look small, fragile, and human. For a long moment she said nothing. Then softly, you always thought power was in your voice, Marcus. But it was in your silence. Her voice trembled, but her heart was steady. If you wake up, if you really live, I hope you'll use that power to build, not to break. She reached out, brushed her fingers against his hand, not forgiveness, not love, just acknowledgement, and turned to leave. As she stepped out, Dr. Adams entered. He's stable for now, he said. The next 72 hours are critical. His body must accept the graft. Rejection is still possible. Keisha nodded. If he makes it, maybe he was meant to. Later that night, in her own room, Keisha couldn't sleep. Rain pelted the windows again, the sky a restless gray. She thought of everything, the screams, the apologies, the faces of the nurses who had watched her almost die. And the one truth she couldn't ignore. Somehow through all of it she still didn't want Marcus dead. She whispered into the dark, Lord, don't let him die hating himself. Let him live to learn. Auntie Miriam stirred beside her. You're praying for him? Keisha nodded slowly. I'm praying for me too. I don't want to carry this pain forever. Auntie reached for her hand. Then don't. You're allowed to let go without forgetting. 2 days passed. Marcus remained unconscious, hovering between life and loss. The doctors watched his numbers climb and fall like tides. On the third morning, as sunlight streamed through the blinds, his fingers moved. His eyelids twitched. A nurse gasped. Doctor, he's waking. Dr. Adams rushed in. Marcus? Can you hear me? A groggy whisper escaped his lips. Keisha. She's safe, Adams said softly. You both are. Marcus's eyes fluttered open. For the first time they were clear. No fury, no fear, just a hollow kind of peace. Did Samuel? He's recovering well. You owe him your life. Marcus blinked, tears forming. I owe all of them my life. That afternoon when he was strong enough to sit up, Keisha visited. She stood by the door while Auntie Miriam wheeled her in slowly. He looked up. Their eyes met. Silence stretched between them, long, heavy, honest. Finally, Keisha spoke. You survived. So did you, he said weakly. She nodded. That's the real miracle. He swallowed hard. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to, she said softly. But you need to change. Not for me, for the person you see in the mirror. Because he's the one you've been fighting all this time. Marcus nodded, voice trembling. I will. I promise. She stood quietly, then whispered, Promises don't heal, Marcus. Actions do. She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, he called after her. Keisha. She paused. Tell our child I'll never raise my hands in anger again, only in protection. Keisha's eyes glistened. I'll tell them, if you mean it. I do. She gave one last nod and walked away, her back straight, her steps slow but sure. Marcus leaned back against his pillow, tears sliding down his temples. For the first time in his life, they weren't tears of anger or shame. They were cleansing. That night, Peter sat by Marcus's bedside. The older man studied him in silence, then said, My brother, pain has a way of breaking what pride could not. Marcus nodded. I learned that too late. Peter shook his head. Not too late. You're still here. He leaned closer. You've been given what most men never get, a second chance and living witnesses to your repentance. Don't waste it. Marcus nodded again. I won't. Outside the rain had stopped. The moon glowed softly against the hospital glass, pale and calm. A week later, Samuel was discharged, Keisha was walking again, and Marcus was scheduled for counseling sessions as part of his recovery and probation. The legal charges against him would proceed, but with testimony from Keisha and her family, the judge allowed him to receive therapy before sentencing. When they all met one last time in the courtyard before discharge, there was no grand reconciliation, just quiet acceptance. Keisha looked at him and said, We're not husband and wife anymore, Marcus. But maybe someday we'll be two people who learned from the same storm. He nodded. That's enough for me. Later, as the ambulance carried Marcus to his rehabilitation center, he looked out the window at the fading skyline. For the first time in a long time he didn't feel cursed. He felt alive. He whispered to himself, maybe this is what mercy looks like, when pain finally runs out of reasons to stay. And somewhere in the maternity ward across town, Keisha placed her hand over her belly, smiling faintly. We survived, she whispered to her unborn child. And that's more than enough. A year had passed. The hospital corridors that once echoed with cries and machines now lived only in memory. Life had moved forward as life always does, slowly, stubbornly, beautifully. Marcus Cole stood in front of a small community hall in downtown Atlanta, wearing a plain gray suit and holding a stack of pamphlets that read, Men Can Heal Too, a workshop for anger management and self-redemption. He wasn't the same man who had walked those hospital halls in handcuffs. His eyes were calmer now. His voice, once sharp like a weapon, carried gentleness born from repentance. He volunteered weekly at the center, sharing his story not to justify but to warn. Good evening, everyone, he began as a handful of men took seats. I used to believe anger made me powerful. I was wrong. It made me small. It made me dangerous to the people I loved most. He paused, letting the silence breathe. But pain, if you let it, can teach you how to build again. It can become the tool that shapes a better man. A younger man in the front row raised his hand. How do you forgive yourself for what you did? Marcus took a deep breath. You don't. Not at first. Forgiveness isn't a doorway, it's a long road. You walk it every day by living differently. By choosing peace even when anger begs for a voice. After the meeting, Marcus walked outside. The evening air smelled of fried plantain and rain on hot pavement. Across the street, children were playing football, their laughter bright against the dusk. He smiled faintly. Once, that sound would have irritated him, now it was the only sound that reminded him life still had goodness left. His phone buzzed. A message from Auntie Miriam. Keisha delivered safely. Baby girl. They named her Hope. Marcus froze. His eyes welled instantly. Hope, he whispered. The word felt like grace on his tongue. He sat on the steps, reading the message again and again, tears spilling freely. She kept her promise, he murmured. She built something beautiful out of the pain. Meanwhile, at a small suburban clinic outside Decatur, Keisha held her newborn close. The baby's skin glowed with soft brown warmth. Her fingers curled around Keisha's thumb as if to say, "I'm here." Peter sat beside her, beaming through tears. "She looks just like you," he said. Auntie Miriam chuckled. "Thank God she doesn't look like Marcus." Keisha smiled faintly, then whispered, "No. But she carries his blood. And maybe this time it'll be used for good." The nurse entered, handing her a small envelope. "A delivery came for you this morning. From the rehabilitation center." Keisha frowned, then opened it carefully. Inside was a folded letter, written in the careful handwriting she knew so well. "Keisha, if you're reading this, it means I've finally completed my year of rehabilitation. I don't know if you ever want to see me again, and that's okay. This isn't a plea, it's gratitude. Your forgiveness kept me alive. Samuel's courage gave me life. Peter's wisdom gave me a purpose. But you, Keisha, you gave me a lesson I'll never stop learning." I named the men's group Hope. Because I realized that's what you carried inside you, even when I gave you every reason not to. You once said the man you married died the night he hurt you. You were right. But someone else was born that night. Not a husband, not a hero, just a man finally willing to listen to his soul. Thank you for letting me live long enough to change. Marcus. Keisha stared at the letter for a long time. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Instead, she kissed her baby's forehead. "Hope," she whispered, "that's what we'll call you." Months later, Marcus visited a small countryside retreat where he'd begun volunteering for families affected by domestic violence. He helped repair homes, mentored recovering men, and spoke in schools about the cycle of abuse. One day, as he was packing up supplies, a familiar voice called from behind. "Seems you've been busy changing lives." He turned and froze. Keisha stood a few feet away, wearing a flowing Ankara dress, a small child on her hip. "Keisha," his voice caught. "You came." "I didn't come for you," she said softly. "I came to donate to your program. Hope deserves a world where men know better." He smiled faintly, glancing at the little girl. "She's beautiful." "She's strong," Keisha corrected gently. "And kind. I'll raise her to know that strength isn't in power, it's in peace." Marcus nodded, eyes glistening. "Can I?" he hesitated. "Can I say hello?" Keisha looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. He crouched down. "Hi there, little one. I'm Marcus." The child blinked, then smiled shyly. "Hi." He laughed softly, wiping a tear. "You look just like your mother." "She has your eyes," Keisha said quietly. Marcus stood again. "Thank you for coming. For this. I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Keisha shifted hope in her arms. "This isn't reconciliation, Marcus. It's closure. The kind that builds peace, not promises." He nodded. "That's more than I deserve. But thank you." She smiled faintly. "Take care of your new life. And make sure it means something." He met her gaze, voice steady. "It already does." They stood there for a long moment, two people bound by a past they could never erase, but finally free from its weight. Then Keisha turned and walked away, her child's laughter trailing behind like the sound of healing itself. Marcus watched them disappear down the sunlit path, then whispered to the wind, "Thank you, God, for letting me learn too late but not too last." As dusk fell, the men's group gathered again in the community hall. Marcus stood before them, holding up one of the pamphlets. The new title printed across it read, "From Anger to Grace, The Journey of Hope." He smiled. Sometimes redemption doesn't mean getting back what you lost. It means learning how to live better with what's left. He looked around at the men, some broken, some hopeful, all listening, and said, "Every one of us has a story. Don't let yours end in regret. Let it begin in change." The room fell quiet, then slowly filled with the sound of applause. And somewhere far away, Keisha sat by her window holding baby Hope, watching the same sunset that washed over Marcus's face. Two lives once bound by pain, now walking separate roads paved with peace.